It's been a month since a West Springfield truck driver crashed into a group of motorcycle riders in New Hampshire, killing 7, and raising questions about why the driver, 23-year-old Volodymyr Zhukovsky, who's now facing negligent homicide charges, was allowed behind the wheel in the first place. And in the weeks since, what started with questions about why one man's license was not suspended has spiraled into a full-blown scandal for the state's Registry of Motor Vehicles, which seems to be getting worse by the day. First, an internal review in the days after the crash found that the RMV missed a series of out-of-state traffic violations for Zhukovsky, which should have meant the suspension of his commercial license. The revelation prompted the registrar of the department, Aaron Devaney, to resign. But as the review continued, it became clear the RMV's problems went far beyond the crash in New Hampshire. A few days after Devaney resigned, the governor announced that 540 other drivers should have been suspended too, because the team responsible for sorting through out-of-state alerts, the Merit Rating Board, stopped going through the mail more than 15 months before. That number has since ticked up to more than 1,600 drivers. And just last week, we learned that the registry has also been failing to notify local police when a license is suspended or revoked, so that local officers can monitor drivers who aren't allowed to be on the road. Now, in the wake of the initial inquiry, Governor Charlie Baker promised action.
The registry will keep working around the clock to address this matter, rectify the situation.
But as the Boston Globe reported last week, the leader of the RMV team responsible for sorting through those out-of-state alerts, Thomas Bose, left for a European vacation less than a week after the crash. And to make matters even worse, Bose and 3 other RMV officials failed to show up for a planned hearing at the State House today, forcing the legislature's Joint Committee on Transportation to abruptly recess. One of the chairs of that committee joins me now, Representative William Strauss. Senator Joe Boncore intended to be here, but he had to stay at the State House for a budget vote. Chairman Strauss, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jim.
Let me see if I understand this correctly. I was incredulous when I read the Globe story today. 7 people are dead. Hundreds are allowed to drive, or were allowed to drive, who shouldn't be allowed to drive. Yet you as an elected official are precluded from asking questions of the people in charge of these parts of the registry. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I don't think it's fair.
But it's what happened today.
It's what happened today when this was not the position taken by the committee. We made a request in writing a week ago to the Secretary on behalf of the administration.
Secretary Pollock.
Secretary Pollock.
Yeah.
For a series of witnesses, including the 2 department heads who still today work for the Commonwealth.
Including this guy Bose, yes?
Yes, he was one of the 2 department heads, to come before the committee and ask questions that are obvious to many. And we did ask for a lot of documents because a lot of documents are called for here.
So after the hearing, Stephanie Pollock said the following: "We think it's important for both our investigation and theirs, meaning yours, that we get to the bottom of what happened, so we will continue to work with the committee to find a path forward that satisfies their needs, but maintains the integrity of the Grant Thornton forensic audit." Grant Thornton is an outside private firm.
That's correct.
That the Department of Transportation has essentially hired to investigate itself. And as long as they are doing their private investigation, you're being told you can't interview at a hearing the responsible players. Is that accurate?
I think that's exactly what we've been told by the Secretary, and clearly today I think it was expressed by myself, my co-chair, Senator Boncore, that was unacceptable. It wasn't right, because not only is this private firm, who may be fully competent, answerable to no one else but the agency itself that's being investigated. But we in the legislature have a long-standing, goes back 175 years of precedent, constitutional role ourselves to be able to gather facts on what is obviously an important topic of public interest.
You know, I'm not even going to say what this sounds exactly like, but in certain other settings, the reason that witnesses are not permitted to go before legislative bodies is the argument is, well, it's already been investigated by another government entity or a special counsel. I have never, again, you're more of a student of this than I. Do you know of a situation where legislators are precluded from asking questions in an investigation because the entity being investigated has hired an outside private firm and are deferring to them until they're done their work?
I've been there for over 25 years. I've asked other people. I've never seen anything like it. But it wasn't just not being able to ask questions, but being told that we could only ask questions from on certain areas, and others we would be excluded from receiving answers.
Why are you excluded? From like what areas?
Well, that was the position of the secretary, was that anything involving what the public most wants to know about, how did this happen, we would have to wait until the audit is done. That's wholly unacceptable. And the conflict here is that while the administration is investigating it, apparently they've learned enough, not telling us how, that the governor filed legislation on pieces of this last week. And we're supposed to act on his legislative proposal before we get to delve into, well, how did we get to this point?
That would increase penalties in commercial drivers who
Correct.
have certain violations, which sounds to me like a good idea. But again,
well, there's no question there's a lot to merit that, but it also leaves aside the question of really it's a complicated agency to run, but at its heart, what we're beginning to identify, because we have other ways of gathering information, is that this is a question of resources. And one of the documents that I did put into the record for the public of the committee's hearings is that for reasons we understand, line speed, how long it takes for the public to go through registry processes, the registry itself was described by the secretary 2 years ago of having a customer-centric philosophy. All well and good, obviously, but we're beginning to develop information that suggests that the resources for the public safety function of the registry may not have been fully supported.
So I don't mean to beat this to death, but just one more thing about this private outside, Grant Thornton. They have a 60-day mandate or something. What happens when Secretary Pollock, for example, is approached by them and they say, we need another 60? And they grant it. Does that mean that we have to wait 120 days, according to the administration, before you're allowed to ask questions? Or 220 days? Is that the way it will work?
I think it's the determination, not just of the committee, but the Senate President and the Speaker, that we will not allow ourselves to be in that kind of situation.
What does that mean? You're going to subpoena these people?
Well, you know, there are other committees, separate of the House, separate of the Senate, that have so-called subpoena powers, but there is a determination that this has to be a joint effort of both the House and Senate.
So what are you going to do?
Well, we've approached in the way the governor indicated a few weeks ago, which is cooperation. We've made requests in good faith for documents. If forced, and it's not where we want to go, both the House and Senate could vote to grant subpoena powers. It's extraordinary that we would have to talk about that.
Can we talk about this Thomas Bose guy again? I read this story in the Globe, and talk about incredulous. He leaves for a week vacation, a week after this horror, and from what the Globe reports, he arrives in England on the day that it is discovered that, 53 bins of envelopes that are unopened, that have these notices that should have led to suspensions, are found. He doesn't come home. He's not ordered home. He gets to go to the Red Sox-Yankees game in London. I guess that's really an important thing. Is anything going to happen to him? I mean, obviously he's not come before your committee.
No. Is
there any accountability? By the way, I'm not suggesting malevolence, obviously, on anybody's part, but obviously some serious things went seriously wrong. Is he going to be held accountable for anything?
I'm not trying to avoid the question. We just haven't been able to get that kind of information to know whether the fact that apparently was well known throughout the Quincy building that there were these boxes sitting in a conference room. It wasn't exclusive to him from everything I've been hearing.
People knew this before the New Hampshire accident. Is that what you're saying?
That there were boxes sitting there in a conference room in that building.
With unopened envelopes.
Correct. So if it turns out that it was well known, then not to excuse anyone's behavior, we need to know who else knew, whether the resources were provided, whether the resources were requested, just to get to what was the organizational problem. So I'm not here because I don't know enough yet to say one person is the person that we need to focus on.
I mean, there may be more.
That's what we'd like to know.
Speaking of more, my assumption is you don't just wait like I do in the morning to read the Globe to find out what's going on. Are other shoes, I mean, almost every day there's another story about the registry. Are other shoes about to drop that we don't know about yet?
I guess I would say instinct and experience tells me yes, because of some of the things that we're looking at. And the natural process in this kind of case is that kind of information tends to work its way to the public realm. Whether
Do you know something you're not telling me and can't?
I think there are things we're looking at that it would be early for me to say.
Okay.
But if we're the ones that have to indicate it, we will.
One last thing before you go. When you were here with Senator Boncory, we talked about whether new revenue was needed and this is May 14th you were here, can what needs to be done in the larger transportation system, it's not about the registry, be done without new revenue? And here's your response and Senator Boncory's. Can we do what we need to do without new revenue?
No. I think we need more money into the Transportation Trust Fund to cover our roads, bridges, and mass transit assets, and we have to do it right away.
I agree completely with the chairman. I think we need new money. We can't exist on what we're getting. We need new revenue today.
You said right away. Senator Boncory said today. That was 2 months ago. When are we going to see something out of you guys?
The Speaker has made clear publicly, and my comments have reflected that he has said in October or early November the House will be in session to consider funding for transportation, and for the reason that the public knows as well as anyone else that to get us to, in the example of the T, a state of good repair within 15 years is too long to wait.
So that means new taxes will be voted on in October.
I don't know where else you get the revenue to bring our transportation system to what it should be.
Bill Strauss, thanks for your work. Appreciate it.
Sure.